They committed no crimes. Yet they were imprisoned by the US government. Their arrests and incarceration were motivated by racism, fear, and the failure of political leadership. These are the untold stories of Hawaiʻi Island. In 1885, larger numbers of Japanese began to immigrate to Hawaii. Many came to work the sugar plantations. Others came as ministers and teachers. All who came were in search of a better life.
My father's name is Joichi Tahara. He was born July 7, 1888, and he came to Hawaii when he was, I think it's in 1906. He was about 18 years old. We lived in the volcano area, right next to the old volcano house. And after I was born, then we moved to Pauwilo. My father bought this store before he moved to Pauwilo, sort of a general merchandise store. He also had a big garage and sort of like a community center.
We used to see people gather in their garage, and they had shibai, and they had movies there.
He was born in Kumamoto. I think he and a few of his friends were going to come here with the intention of working in the sugar plantation and then maybe go on to further their education. And so when he came here, I guess he was a little more educated than many of the folks. So he then reported all the births, marriages to Japan of the folks that lived on this island. We were living in Halaula, Hawaii.
My father's name was George Yoshio Hoshida. He came to Hawaii in 1912, I believe. He was 4 years old. My father did various sales jobs and eventually ended up as a appliance salesperson for Hawaii Electric Light Company.
For the Issei, or first-generation immigrants and their children, the Nisei, dark clouds soon rolled over their lives as the nation of Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. As the smoke still rose from Pearl Harbor, squads of FBI, military police, and local police started arresting Japanese on the FBI custodial detention list across the territory of Hawaii.
I recall, the sheriff and some other people coming and knocking at our door at night and taking my father away. And at that time, we had no idea where he went.
For several years prior to World War II, the FBI compiled a detailed list of Japanese to arrest and detain in the event of war. The detention list contained Buddhist ministers, Japanese language school teachers, community leaders, and those with ties to the Japanese government.
No, that was neither a war. This dead policeman came to your support arrest him. Say, Oshima, I'll hold you under arrest. And they took him to the Kilauea military camp.
Nearly 400 individuals were arrested across the territory of Hawaii in the immediate days that followed Pearl Harbor. 82 were from Hawaiʻi Island. Martial law was soon declared in Hawaii. Military control began, and civil liberties and the Constitution were suspended.
My father was very concerned about being associated with the Japanese. And so he was concerned about that and made a point of not speaking Japanese in public. He and my mother got rid of some of our Girls' Day dolls and he burnt a lot of his Japanese language literature. He was arrested a couple of months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. I believe it was in February. It's rather ironic that my father was arrested by his own brother-in-law, who was then a detective with the local police. My uncle, Richie, came alone to pick up my dad. At worst, it's really tragic that you have people from the same community having to take actions that they would normally not take against relatives and friends. I believe he was arrested because of his close association with the Buddhist church, and also because he was a judo instructor.
President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066 in February of 1942. This led to the mass incarceration of all persons of Japanese ancestry from the U.S. West Coast. Hawaii was spared from a mass incarceration. However, selective arrests continued through 1942. At least 400 individuals were incarcerated from Hawaiʻi Island.
Well, I think it was a Saturday afternoon. With police and I guess FBI agent came and then.
It was a shock. And of course, rumors go around, this and that. But they were very disturbed that father was taken away.
Tahara was taken to Kilauea military camp, where a majority of the prisoners were held, including Oshima and Hoshida. KMC was originally a rest and recreation camp for the Army. George Hoshida began documenting his incarceration experiences immediately, starting with Kilauea military camp.
The family did go to visit him once while he was there, and I went along with the whole family. We could actually sit down and visit with him.
After Kilauea military camp, Kanesaburo Oshima was sent to Sand Island on Oahu, and then onto camps on the U.S. mainland, eventually ending up at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
He was so concerned about the family and his wife and 11 kids with war going on, food shortage. How is family surviving? That's right. One day, he really bothered him and he tried to escape. He climbed the internment camp fence and he got shot and he got killed. So that's his story.
A policeman came to notify the Oshima family about the death of Kanesaburo Oshima. He was 58 years old. His children carried on with the management of Oshima's store in Kainaliu.
My mother learned that she was pregnant. My father was the sole breadwinner of the family. My mother suffered a nervous breakdown. And her family really were wonderful in supporting her and helped her through that period. And she eventually gave birth to my younger sister in October 1942.
Neighbors treated us differently, They felt like, we were spies. And so we were kind of discriminated against, and whenever they wanted something from our store, they'd ask my mother, I guess, to deliver it to the back door. We could not make a living. So the following year then, when they gave us the option to go to camp, my mother and my older sisters said yes.
I understand that she received a notice that she was going to be sent to internment camp. I don't think it was voluntary. My mother took my 2-month-old sister, younger sister, and two of us to join my father on the mainland. My oldest sister, Taeko, was profoundly brain damaged in a traffic accident when she was maybe 3 months old. And so my mother placed her in Waimano home here on Oahu before she left for internment camp.
We were away for a good year plus, I would say, because he went from the holding place in Honolulu, he went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, then he went to Livingston, Louisiana, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. So he was in 3 different places before he joined us in Jerome. It was cold. I would say it was in January. And here we are, with our Hawaiian white sandals, stepping off the train, and there's snow on the ground. Well, we're in Block 39. Most of the Block 39 was from Hawaii. It was pretty bleak, barracks with black tar paper, not very inviting, but we slept on cots. And we had a honeypot, I guess you call it, because we didn't have restrooms, right there in the barracks.
Back on Oahu, Joichi Tahara was incarcerated at the Sand Island Detention Facility and later the Honouliuli internment camp. His eldest son was able to visit him.
He went to visit him several times until he volunteered for 2.
Nisei soldiers comprised the 100th Infantry Battalion and later the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. In 1943, President Roosevelt approved the creation of a segregated Japanese-American Army unit. 10,000 men from Hawaii volunteered. The price was high to prove their loyalty to America, as the 100th and 442nd suffered heavy casualties in combat. The 442nd is still the highest decorated military unit for its size and length of service in the history of the U.S. military. Other Japanese Americans served in units like the Military Intelligence Service. To prove their loyalty to America, 2 of Joichi Tahara's sons served in the U.S. Army while their father was behind barbed wire.
Nash was in the 100th Battalion, and Uncle Yoshiyuki, who we call Uncle Fat, he was in the 442. So they both served in World War II.
The family received some bad news on September 4th, 1943.
The MP, my mother said that the MP came and told him that in the morning that he suffered a stroke. Then they came back afterwards and said he passed away.
Joichi Tahara died in the Honouliuli internment camp on September 4th, 1943.
It was sad. I'm sorry. Don't wish that on anybody.
Months before his death, Joichi wrote his wife a letter that was almost like a last testament.
In the event that something should happen to me, I leave this note for you. Dearest wife Tomeo and my 9 children, I say, please do not cry out in sorrow if I were not able to return home. Now that my destiny has dictated me to be the little stone to be spared for the good of the country, I can only pray that you will live safely and happily with support from our children. Luckily, I have you, the best wife, the wisest mother, who put me at ease to conclude my life as a Japanese with no shame. In fact, I am quietly happy to be waiting my destiny.
He was a good man, and the children that Mother brought up turned out to be all good kids.
The Hoshida family also received bad news about their disabled daughter that they left behind on Oahu while they were incarcerated.
They received a report that my sister Taeko had died, and it was as a result of drowning in a bathtub while she was unattended. I have difficulty talking about that event.
They closed Jerome, and then they moved us to Gila, Arizona. I believe it was 1944. But I remember the contrast, of living in Arkansas where the Mississippi overflowed in the spring with the water moccasins, and then to be moved to the desert where it was hot and dusty. We had dust storms there.
August 14, 1945. Japan surrenders. World War II ends. Japanese Americans behind barbed wire begin to come home. The camps are gradually shut down. The Kirita family returns to Hawaii and then moves to Honolulu.
And my father became a janitor for Dole Corporation. And I know that he worked even when he was in his 70s. And I recall feeling a little sad for him because here's a man who was very proud of his family and, his heritage.
He eventually became a salesperson for the Moses Company in Hilo.
And there was really no bitterness. As he said, cannot help. This is how it is.
The descendants of Kanesaburo Oshima continue to run the store that bears his name on Hawaiʻi Island.
My grandmother's citizenship got taken away during the war because she married a Japanese alien, my grandfather. She did not have her citizenship anymore, although she was born in the United States. Funny part about it is that years go by and she's 70 years old, living with us in Oahu, and she is going to get her passport to go to Japan. And they go and they said, no, she's not an American citizen and she's not a Japanese citizen. So my mom said she was as if a person without a country. And so she had to retake the test. And one of my cousins said she remembers grandma going, celebrating, yay, I passed the test, because she's 70 years old, In
the 1970s, groups of Japanese Americans organized a movement to seek redress from the federal government. Esther Kirita Noguchi's sister testified at the Commission on the Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians hearings.
The story needed to be told, and there weren't too many from Hawaii that, would go and testify for a commission hearing.
In 1988, President Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act. Former prisoners received a letter of apology from the president and $20,000 in compensation. However, many Issei had passed away by that time. As more time passed, the events of World War II began to fade into distant memory. But more recently, through the efforts of organizations like the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii, a rediscovery of the past has begun. This included archaeological research of all the confinement sites throughout Hawaii, including 4 sites located on Hawaiʻi Island.
When we first came to Hawaii in 2006, there was some information about the different internment camps in Hawaii, and we knew some of the places. But in the last 10 years, a lot more information has come through about where people were held, and so that is what we wanted to investigate this trip. When we first landed at the airport, we went directly to the location that had been identified in the Special Resource Study as being a place where some Japanese Americans were interned and interrogated before being shipped off somewhere. That is right next to the post office that's still standing. And it happens to be also where a military reservation and a prison reservation is shown on an old map from 1944. So that was really exciting for me because when we went there, we found some traces of what would have been the prison camp, including a cesspool, a road, some concrete fragments. Although a lot of the area has been developed, that one particular part has been left alone. Besides Waiakea Prison, the most exciting find was that there are still remains of the Japanese language school in Hilo. Part of the parcel has been built up with an apartment complex and parking lot, but you can still see the foundations of the Japanese language school. And that was a place where the founder of the school was held for quite a while.
Well, KMC is unique amongst the confinement sites because it is the most intact. You can walk into those buildings. You can basically walk in the footsteps of these men. The two buildings that were used for confining Japanese Americans were building number 34 and building number 35. Building 34 was the enlisted men's mess hall, and building number 35 was the enlisted men's barracks. They're both buildings, they're the two largest buildings at KMC, and they were both built in 1916. Building 34 is still used as a cafeteria.
And you can even tell where the guard tower was. Right now, it's a platform for an anchor from a whaling ship.
And then Building 35 is used as a recreation room. The bathroom that the men used were still there. The fireplace that Mr. Hoshida talks about, sitting around and relaxing in is still there. And you can see the landscape that Mr. Hoshida drew in his painting. And the place is almost exactly the way he left it when he left it there in 42. So currently at Kilauea Military Camp, we are in the process of putting up 3 waysides at KMC, and they'll be in 3 different locations near the buildings that were used. And the waysides will explain the story of the detainment at KMC, and people can go there and they can read, some of these stories and look at the buildings and actually, hopefully try and get a better sense of what it was like for these men when they were kept there.
It's very important to us as archaeologists, but also to the public, to be able to experience some of these places. We believe that places have power to evoke not just history, but some of the feelings that went along with that.
So this is good to educate people and let them know that something like this shouldn't have happened,
Our government made a mistake during World War II, but admitted that mistake and has admitted that it wasn't really for national security. It was based on racism, and we need to make sure we don't make that same mistake again.
If we don't understand and know what happened in the past, we're doomed to repeat it.
If you look at the world today, a lot of these things are happening again.
At the beginning of this year, with the new administration, another executive order was signed with the same kind of mentality, a racist mentality with a broad brush, characterized all people coming from 6 Muslim nations are potential terrorists. Clearly, that's not true. The difference between 75 years ago and today is that the Attorney General of Hawaii, Doug Chen, said, "This is wrong," and he challenged it. And a federal district judge of Hawaii, Derek Watson, put a stay on that.
In November of 2017, the Hawaii Coalition for Civil Rights sent an open letter to President Trump urging him to visit the Honouliuli National Monument on Oahu. It was a reminder that government action for national security cannot come at the expense of depriving civil rights, and that there are serious threats to democracy when people are judged on race, religion, or where they came from.
We have a leader who's not quick to condemn racially based actions, and it is a signal to all of us to be very vigilant, to protect those who cannot protect themselves.
We are living in very troubled times.
We can't have an experience like the internment happen again, ever, ever.
Efforts are ongoing for more research and documentation. Untold stories of the people who endured this dark chapter of American history continue to be discovered.